Should some workers actually be celebrating the rise of robotics and automation? And when it comes to ROI, is it smarter for managers to invest in upskilling or in AI? Welcome to Macro Talk, where we examine business news through a big picture lens to help leaders and workers stay ahead of change. I'm your host, Hope King. With me and with these insights is Bijal Shah. She is the CEO of Guild, which is a training, education, and upskilling platform used by major corporations including Walmart, Disney, JP Morgan, and Tesla. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Hope.
I do want to start the show off though with those two questions. Are there workers who should be kind of celebrating the fact that there's more automated assistants coming down the aisle or helping them, let's say, prep salads if you're at a Sweetgreen, for example?
I think so. I think there's a lot of mundane and rote work that Americans do, and honestly, the world more broadly does. And I believe in the human potential and unlocking more of that human potential. And so, our ability to actually automate some of the rote and monotonous work will allow for opportunities for humans to be more curious, to be more customer centric, and to be better stewards of those resources and of their intellectual resources to really innovate and drive our future economy.
Yeah, and I think on that note about the economy and these jobs in particular that we're talking about, that sometimes we do see new technologies being introduced to augment, to supplement, to replace. They are in the sectors that saw the greatest shocks during the pandemic and have still had a hard time bringing all of those workers back to the same levels and maybe to even greater levels because demand for services has increased. And one question I like to ask a lot of economists, and certainly this is, I think, the perfect question for you, is are the types of jobs that are most in demand even desired at all by the workers?
I think that actually there is a desire for many of the jobs that are, patient-facing jobs or even advanced manufacturing jobs. I actually think the challenge is the ability to skill individuals into those jobs. Let's just take healthcare as an example. There is a shortage of rad techs inside of this country, and in order for you to actually become a radiology tech, you have to go through the process of a pretty rigorous process of becoming certified and licensed to do that. But there is a system that is quite antiquated for how you go about getting certification. Cross-state licensure is not an option where you get licensed in one state and it's portable to another state. And so you really do see this shortage because of the complexity around actually upskilling and reskilling. But on our side at Guild, we actually don't see, a shortage of workers taking advantage of upskilling and reskilling opportunities. People want to invest in themselves. They want to invest in finding pathways that are resilient to the future. Sometimes so much so in terms of the demand that we are spending time trying to help point people in the right direction and ensure that they're actually getting enrolled in the types of programs that are going to be resilient to the future economy.
I mean, you lead an organization that helps other organizations grow and, to your point, upskill. I mean, that's of course what you are focused on. So your answer for sure has that context behind it. But, I think what's really notable is that, when you listen to earnings calls with all these companies, everyone's talking about investments in AI. Rarely do I ever hear, as a journalist, any type of investments being allocated to L&D, learning and development, upskilling. Why is that the case?
I actually think that on a lot of earnings calls, especially with the employers that we work with, there is a conversation around workforce development. And so you might not hear it as learning and development. You might hear it as, their broader talent and people strategy. How do we take the workers we have today and prepare them for tomorrow? And I think it goes a little bit beyond just L&D. It actually requires understanding what jobs you need for the future, which is really aligned to the people and talent strategy of the business. I then think it requires focusing on what are the actual content providers or learning modalities that are going to get people the skills that they need. And then how do I bring to bear the right learning content to do that? And then how do I drive mobility inside my organization? So when people are prepared or getting ready, how do I actually drive the ability for people to get from X to Y? And so I do think some of the most innovative companies, you will hear on their earnings calls conversations around their talent strategy, talent development, and people development more broadly, we might not think of those words as L&D, but it requires learning and development to help enable that to truly happen. And then I think you also see some of the most innovative companies having conversations around how can AI augment my workforce in a way that supercharges our ability to do our work. That is also tied to how do you get the right learning strategy in place to connect the dots and to really make your employees more productive, and honestly more engaged and satisfied in the work that they're doing.
When you say have conversations, what conversations are you referring to? I mean, are you talking about what's not being said on the conference calls that are being said in rooms where you sit?
Maybe. I mean, I spent a lot of times with CEOs and CHROs. I was just on the phone with a CEO of a large manufacturer inside the United States about the skills gap and the skills shortage that's inside of our country. And especially for the US, as we try and bring manufacturing back to this country, we don't have the skilled labor we need to man those manufacturing facilities. And so, what do we do to take the talent we have inside the organization today and to get them motivated and excited? And skilled in things that are required to run an advanced manufacturing facility, as an example.
So you are referring to conversations that obviously they're not being called L&D on these earnings calls, but when you talk to business leaders looking at the problems that they have, I think this second question that I posed at the beginning of the show is the ROI question, because with the drastic investments into AI, billions of dollars across, of course, the main tech sector, but also with professional services and banks and everybody talking about those investments. I do wonder, if you're the CFO sitting there looking at where to allocate your dollars, is it smarter to invest in upskilling or actually for AI deployment?
I think you actually have to balance both. And that is kind of the dilemma, if you will, to manage right now, and will be for a while. And I think the companies that are doing it well are thinking about how do I bring my existing workforce along and help them become more AI native while also investing in the tools that are required so that as they become more AI native, we have the ability to adopt tools that makes things more efficient and effective. And I think you need both of those things to be happening. And I do think it's a thing organizations are wrestling with. And I think we've seen organizations only invest in the AI portion of what needs to happen. And in some cases, automating their entire customer service workforce and then having to reverse course when they realize actually what's required is human intelligence combined with artificial intelligence.
Yeah, and I do wonder to that point if your curriculum has changed over the last 3 years, and especially, well, recently with agentic platforms being rolled out for enterprises.
Absolutely. In the last year, we saw a 900% increase in adoption rate of AI curriculum. 3 years ago, we didn't really have, agentic AI or Gen AI curriculum inside of our marketplace. That wasn't something that existed. ChatGPT wasn't in the mainstream. People weren't utilizing it or talking about it. And so, yeah, we've had to adopt the content. We've also had to, in addition to introducing AI content, we have a way greater emphasis on soft skills content, or we like to call them durable skills content, which is content that is focused on communication skills, leadership and influence skills, dot connecting and strategic skills, problem solving skills, all things that are required when you think about a world where agents meet humans, and you're trying to enable and lead a hybrid workforce, if you will, that consists of both types of intellect.
Well, one argument for investing in technology infrastructure is that the overhead costs can be amortized over years and years to come. When you invest in people, there is risk that those people will leave and that those investments will go away. And so I imagine if you're looking at the allocation of resources, that it might make more sense for the longevity of the product and service that you're pouring money into, which AI could be the smarter investment. And I ask that also in the context of, Guild's own success. And so, at this point, I do want to bring up the fact that, of course, your own platform has had layoffs in the last 2 years. And I want to know if that's a reflection of the maybe lack of demand that there now tends to be if for L&D, if people are allocating resources to AI.
The I would say there's two parts of this. The first part is that I think that Any organization who believes that AI is the only solve to driving the business outcomes they're hoping to drive is probably not in touch with reality, especially as it relates to their workforce. If you think about health systems and healthcare, if you think about manufacturing, if you think about traditional trades, they all require applied learning and problem solving to actually deliver on the outcome for the worker. And a lot humans are really good at solving edge case problems. Technology is not quite good at that yet. And so will it become better at it over time? Possibly. I'm not sure if it'll be as good as humans at understanding the context and a situation and then saying, oh, here's this specific situation and this nuance, and therefore here's how I should fix this particular issue, especially when it comes to things that require hands-on and applied application. And so I think for those types of organizations, which are healthcare, manufacturing, all the skills trades. Those are places where I don't think you can say only investing in AI is the answer. Even an advanced manufacturing facility that is producing semiconductor chips inside this country, in order to manage those facilities, to make sure things don't go wrong, to ensure that the facilities and the actual robotics inside those facilities are working, you will need humans and technicians involved. They just need to be able to operate with those systems in a way that I think people are not skilled at doing today. And so I think that's really important for us to keep in mind and ensure we're thinking about. And I do think savvy business leaders are trying to better understand what are the jobs today, how are those jobs evolving, and what does the future look like, and what skills will I need inside my organization. And we would also be, kidding ourselves if we said that every possible skill we need in our organization will come from within the organization. We will need to go find folks from the outside. We will need to retool how our workforce works. And I think there will be a lot of disruption.
Yeah, I totally agree and don't disagree with anything that you said. I guess I'm just bringing into context. I mean, you're, leading a company that, and to be fully transparent with the audience, when I soft launched Macro Talk, you were one of the first business leaders to be in my LinkedIn DMs because you saw the need for a platform like this to also address a lot of worker anxiety around these changes. And so I appreciated that. I think, this is one of the reasons why we wanted to get together and do this. I think the challenge that I'm bringing up that I know you're fully aware of is this backdrop that you and other higher ed and ed tech platforms like even a Chegg are really up against this reallocation of resources away from people and into technology. And so would just love to hear you share more about that challenge.
Yeah, for our business in particular, and in conversations I'm in, I haven't been in a conversation where someone asked me a question on should I be investing in my employees or should I be investing in AI? I haven't been in one of those conversations. It has not happened for me. And in fact, we grew our business and our employer base by 50% last year. And so the notion that employers are not investing in this is not a reality that we see. What I do see is employers pushing very hard on questions around what does my future workforce look like and how do I prepare my employees for that future of work? How do you, Guild, help me evolve the content inside of my marketplace in a way that helps my employees keep up with the reality of where the business is headed? And how do you do it on a timeline that is faster than something like a degree? I need shorter form skilling, which we offer. 60% of our learners are enrolled in shorter form programming. We think of stackability as a core component to what we do. And how do you take these certificates and eventually stack them into something that's deeper and greater, like potentially a degree? And so the reality is they're not asking questions about should I be investing in this? They're asking questions around how can I invest in this in a way where I can bring my workforce along faster and make them more productive in the environment we're in today at a clip that keeps up with the pace of the workforce changing.
Yeah, and speed is of the essence, and time is of the essence because again, investors are looking for that ROI much faster. You know this as well. I think one of the problems there, and again, when we look at the big picture of all of this, I can't help but bring in YouTube University and your TikTok influencers who are trying to help their fellow colleagues and peers learn about different ways of doing things, working in different industries and sectors. how can a guild move fast enough when you have other platforms like that? And of course, if they're not going as depth as to train someone to be a radiologist, but that is another pressure that, platforms like yours are facing in trying to get the scale through these enterprise agreements and training at skill that way. So when you look at that, when you look at the university of the internet and how that plays a role in upskilling, how do you incorporate any of those elements to be as speedy as they are?
We personally think that all forms of learning are really important and different modalities. And like, I use YouTube all the time. I had an issue with my garbage disposal a few weeks ago and it wasn't working. And like, yes, I pulled up YouTube to learn how to actually fix the garbage disposal because I knew that if I tried to call a plumber, it would take too long. And we had a leak in our sink. And so I think that those types of micro applications and micro learning opportunities are really critical for people being able to problem solve in the short term. I also deeply believe that if America is going to continue to have a competitive advantage and kind of continue to be able to innovate, we need deep learning. We need people to think beyond the current situation and the current scope or the specific problem to solve and be able to connect dots and be able to go deeper on how to take the information that they have and stay agile. And so I don't think you replace the need to go deep on a particular topic and to get skilled on a particular topic. And I think those things can sit side by side, and they have been. Like YouTube University, or the concept of using YouTube to learn, is not new. It's been around for a while, and I think it'll continue to exist. I think the content on TikTok lived on YouTube or on Facebook or somewhere else and has become a more viral platform by which to learn things. And I think it's great when you pair deep learning with the ability to solve an immediate problem, you actually can see the magic and the power of pulling those two things together.
Let's move away from the bigger platforms for a second and talk more about at the ground level what workers are dealing with. Can you share with me on a sector by sector basis what leaders in each sector should be focused on when it comes to hourly workers and frontline workers, and what they should be focused on training them for over the next 2 to 3 years?
Yeah, I think there's one macro theme that is sector agnostic. If you have frontline workers, which 80% of our economy is powered by frontline workers, so a large portion of our economy and every sector has them, I think it's really important to figure out how you help train and skill people in utilizing technology alongside the work they're doing today, and making them comfortable with it and making them realize how it can help them answer customers' questions faster, help them problem solve a patient situation in a more nuanced way than they would based on some guidebook that they would have had before, how they can fish for information in a very pointed way relatively quickly so that they have the ability to solve that problem in a more efficient, but more importantly, a more effective way. And I think helping people see how they can pull those two things together so they can supercharge and superpower their own work is something really important that is broad-based and macro. And then I think every sector has its own challenges. If you are in manufacturing, specifically if you are in advanced manufacturing, we don't have the skilled labor today to actually manage skilled manufacturing facilities or advanced manufacturing facilities. And so what do you do to work with, learning providers and institutions to help bring to bear content that will make it easier for someone to understand how hydraulics inside of a robotics facility actually work? These are really important things that need to be sorted out. And so I would ask every industry leader and CHRO or head of talent to be thinking about what is it that you know you're going to need for the future, and how do you make sure that you're actually bringing to bear those types of skills and that type of content, not just to help someone solve the specific issue they saw today, but to actually be able to problem solve across the types of problems they might see as the work continues to evolve.
When you say technology, I mean, it's a very broad term. So, what technology specifically cuts across all of these sectors that employees need to be better leaning on and using for their own careers?
I mean, agentic technology like applies across all sectors. When you think about being able to program agents to go out and connect the dots or take information or and connect the dots for you or retrieve information, analyze that information, put it into another system that doesn't currently talk to each other, that is applicable across all industries. And so understanding how you can utilize that to improve your workflows, improve the way that you are operating, reduce mistakes in the work that you're doing. That is one. If you work in a QA type environment, being able to also use agentic technology to double check your work, to be the first one to actually take a look at what you did and ensure that it is done correctly, and then you do the final review, is another way I think you could use it. Generative AI is also another thing. It's easily accessible. Being able to use it and learn how to get better at prompting that technology is really important. And you do have to learn how to work with it. I think I've heard people say, like, isn't it just like Google search? Like, nobody taught anyone how to use Google search. I actually think it needs more education, and it needs more, you need a better understanding of how to prompt it and what it should be used for and what it shouldn't be used for. And most importantly, how to gut check and validate what is coming out of it.
Can you point to some examples, specific examples of courses that you've rolled off the platform and courses you've had to put back on or add?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just give you a really clear example. There, a few years ago, we had been asked by one of our employer partners to go down the path of helping with skills trades, and not just looking at how you help plumbers or HVAC technicians actually become technicians or electricians, but like how do we get them to be licensed and skilled in this? We ended up actually like removing those programs because they weren't working for working adult learners, and they weren't working in the asynchronous format that we had them on the platform. Technology has helped evolve that. Licensure requirements have also helped evolve that. And so we've re-entered that space because one, that is where the jobs of the future will be. And two, as the content online gets better and you can use things like VR to help simulate what it might be like to be fixing equipment, you have the ability to scale the training in a way that you couldn't before.
You talked about healthcare jobs that are in demand a little bit earlier with the radiology example. What other areas of the economy are most insulated right now from job cuts? And for the next 2 to 3 years, which areas do you think are most insulated?
I think of the world as, and this is based on work that that the Future of Work Center at Harvard has done. I think that there are three types of jobs that will exist in the future. Ones that require high math and high social, ones that require high social and low math, and then vocational jobs. And so when I think about jobs that are resilient to these things, I think about places where you need really good understanding and deep understanding of things like math. Advanced software engineering requires actually a really good foundation and fundamentals on math. And I think what's changing is that you can't really be a great software engineer without talking with people. And so now you have to go run those skills and understand those skills because I think there will now be a hybrid between product, software engineering, and designers. And so your ability to have fluidity amongst those three roles will become really important, which is where the high math, high social exists. Then when you think about something like vocational, we already talked about it. I don't think jobs that require applied or hands-on facilitation are going away anytime soon. Yes, surgeons are better assisted with advanced technology to move forward and provide the ability to do surgery on a human. You still require the doctor to be able to do that, and you still require the nurse to assist the doctor, and you still require a medical assistant to help enable that. Those are not going away. I think the work will get more challenging and more interesting and more intellectually stimulating if we do things right.
Well, I also think that emotionally, this is going to play a role for a lot of workers if some of the more rote stuff goes away. I was thinking about this ahead of our chat today, which is that if you are looking at soft skills, a lot of that requires emotional intelligence, also emotional labor. Frontline workers during the pandemic and as reopening began, they really bore the brunt of the anger and anxieties of horrible customer treatment. Are you upskilling for more emotional labor? And is it really fair to ask a lot of these workers to do more of this when it's a very different kind of labor?
Yeah, To your fairness question, part of it is it's the reality of like where the world is headed and kind of the world already we live in today, hope. And so I think helping people have more emotional resilience is really important, and helping people navigate emotional context in the work relationship is really important. We have a cohorted learning product, and part of the reason why we have this cohorted learning product is so that people learn to work with others while they're going through and learning things. And when we talk about, why historically academic institutions, degree-seeking
Mm-hmm.
institutions were impactful, a lot of that had to do with the social construct around people getting together, working on projects together, solving problems together, and being able to negotiate with one another how you might go about doing something. And so we have to bring that also into the frontline worker context. We have to bring that into the frontline leader context as well, around how do you help people simulate what that might look like, be engaged in conversations with their coworkers, and build community while you're learning in a way that really drives progress. And so, yeah, I think it's absolutely important and a very astute point that you're making.
And so you are building more of these tools, it sounds like, or platforms for
Yeah,
these
we
types
have
of.
a cohorted learning product that we sell today that is focused on how do you help people learn in the context of learning with one another, and how do you do it in an asynchronous or more virtual environment, because we have distributed workforces. Even if you're a large retailer, it is really hard to get all of your frontline leaders into one room and one place. And so, how do you do that in a more digital context?
In 2 to 3 years, what are we going to be talking about at that point? What are the issues of that moment?
I think still at that moment, you're going to see baby boomers retiring, a shortage of workers, especially workers on in frontline hands-on roles, and you're going to see us having more and more conversations around how do we help people adapt to being able to utilize AI alongside their jobs and feel really confident and excited about doing it versus fearful and concerned around what it means.
And I know that, you are probably upskilling yourself in some way. So I would love to know what you're doing day to day and what advice you have and what you see leaders that you admire that are most successful. What are they doing to upskill themselves?
I think there's a few things. One is obviously taking, our own courses on artificial intelligence and how it relates to business strategy and the things that we're doing. But more importantly, for me in particular, and again, I have a data science background, and so I've been quite excited about the potential unlocks of this type of technology. I use it to build my own agents. I used it last week to build something that I've been doing manually, where I really want to figure out how to scale it. And so playing around with different technologies to be able to do that, whether it's Zapier and connecting that to our intelligence tools inside of our organization and to my email tool, or even to LinkedIn to be able to do the things I'm trying to do. And then personally as well, building, my husband and I are both tinkerers. We love to build things, and utilizing at home to make our home life more efficient and effective.
Can you open up about what those things are, what you just did for yourself and what you're doing at home?
Yeah, we're working on a project and this technology already exists. So this is more about learning and curiosity than it is like building something novel. We have a lot of different calendars to manage in our household. We're both working adults. We have two little kids. And so we are building a system that allows us to automatically update a visual calendar, so that we can see where people are at any given time. And we probably could have bought the technology, but it honestly was fun to use different apps, and to tinker around with being able to pull those pieces together.
And then your productivity hack that you just built for yourself?
Oh, yes. I wanted to get more feedback from our learners on specific programs that they're enrolled in. And one of the ways that I do that today is that I kind of scour LinkedIn for people posting about programs they've completed. And then I ping them and ask, like, hey, I say I'm the CEO of Guild. I saw you completed this program. Like, can you give me feedback on the actual content of the program? And that's not really efficient as the CEO to keep doing. And so I built an agent to help me do it.
I love that you have your mini side hustle slash your own mini training programs for
Yeah.
yourself. Was there anything today that we didn't talk about that you wanted to talk about in the context of this dramatic reorganization of the labor force at this moment?
I think the only other thing I would add, for individuals in particular, is I think that this technology is coming. It is here. It will continue to evolve. It can't do everything perfect, and it honestly doesn't get everything right. And there will always be edge cases. But I do think that experimenting with it and continuing to figure out how you can make your own life more efficient and effective, or make your customers' lives more efficient and effective, is a really good way to experiment, and I would encourage everyone to be experimenting with this technology.
Right, we should all be tinkerers. I like that.
Yeah.
Bijal, thank you so much for spending time with us here, and I look forward to our next conversation.
Awesome. Thank you for having me.